The sun rose golden over the red earth of Nkanzi village, where songs of birds and the smell of roasting maize filled the air. In a small mud house near the baobab tree lived Amina, a kind, soft-spoken woman whose heart was as pure as the morning dew. Her beauty wasn't just in her face, it was in her humility, her hands that helped the poor, and her laughter that could melt anger. One day, a man from the city, Kwame, returned to his ancestral home. He was tall, confident, and dressed in fine suits that shone under the sun. Rumor spread like wildfire. Kwame, the rich trader from Accra, has come to take a wife. Every mother in Nkanzi whispered her daughter's name, hoping fate would favor them. But it was Amina who caught his eye. She served him palm wine when he visited her father's compound, bowing gently as tradition demanded. He smiled, impressed by her manners. "A woman like you belongs in my home," he said. Within a week, the drums of marriage echoed through the village. Amina left her thatched home, her eyes wet with tears and joy. "Remember who you are, my daughter," her mother whispered. "A wife is not a servant, but a partner." Amina nodded, clutching her wooden jewelry box, her only possession. When they arrived in the city, Amina's breath was taken away. Tall buildings, shiny cars, and the noise of generators filled the air. She had never seen such a world. But Kwame's home was beautiful. Painted walls, polished floors, and servants everywhere. "From now on," he said, "you are Madam Amina." For a few months, life was sweet. Kwame bought her fine clothes, took her to church, and introduced her to friends. But soon, things changed. He began to come home late, smelling of perfume and alcohol. The warmth in his voice turned into commands. "Amina, cook my food," he would shout. "Clean that floor properly. What do I pay you for?" She looked at him, tears forming. "Pay me. I am your wife." Kwame laughed bitterly. "Then act like one. A wife who works for her husband." That night, Amina lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning slowly. The golden life she dreamt of was fading into shadows. The city had turned her marriage into something she couldn't recognize. The next morning, the servants were dismissed. "From now on," Kwame announced, "we don't need them. Amina will handle the house." "She's strong, aren't you?" His friends laughed, and Amina's heart sank from that day. Her soft hands grew rough from scrubbing floors, and her beautiful dresses turned into faded wrappers. She was no longer the wife in the mansion, she was the maid, but deep inside, a quiet fire began to grow, the fire of a woman who knew her worth. The morning sun filtered through the golden curtains of the big house, but inside, Amina's world was dark and heavy. She woke before dawn, swept the floors, washed the dishes, and cooked Kwame's breakfast before he even opened his eyes. The once proud wife of a wealthy man had become the silent shadow that cleaned his mess. Kwame had changed completely. He no longer called her my queen. Now he barked orders at her like a stranger. "Amina, where's my tea? Amina, why is my shirt not ironed?" The mansion echoed with his voice, and she moved quietly like a ghost. Afraid of his anger, at first she thought it was just stress, maybe the city had made him hard. But then she noticed the lipstick stains on his shirts, the strange perfumes that lingered on his clothes, and the late nights that stretched into early mornings. One evening, she gathered courage and asked softly, "Kwame, who is she?" He turned sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "Who is who?" "The woman whose scent follows you home." He laughed, cruelly. "Ah, so the maid has become a detective. You should mind your broom, not my business." Her eyes filled with tears, but she said nothing. The next day, she saw him at the gate, dropping off a young woman in high heels and red lipstick. The woman looked back at Amina and smirked. It was the kind of look that said, "You've lost your place." From that day, Kwame stopped hiding his infidelity. He brought the woman Nala to the house, claiming she was his business partner. But everyone knew what she really was. Amina was forced to serve her tea, clean after her, and pretend not to see the stolen glances between them. At night, Amina cried quietly. The city lights glowed outside, mocking her pain. "How did love turn into slavery?" she whispered to herself. Then one afternoon, an old woman came selling fruits at the gate. She looked frail, but her eyes were sharp. "My child," she said to Amina, "you look like someone whose spirit has been buried." Amina forced a smile. "It's nothing, Mama." The woman shook her head. "When a tree forgets its roots, it dries up. Do not forget where you came from." Those words struck her heart. That night, Amina took out the wooden jewelry box her mother had given her. Inside were the beads from her wedding day and a small folded note. She unfolded it carefully. It read, "When the world forgets you, remember yourself." Tears streamed down her cheeks. She whispered a prayer in her native tongue, the same one her mother used to say by the fire. "Ancestors, give me strength. I will not die here like a slave." The next morning, Amina woke before sunrise, but something in her had changed. She tied her headscarf tight, cleaned the house with determination, and prepared Quame's breakfast, like always. When he came out of the bedroom, she greeted him with calm eyes. "Your food is ready," she said. He noticed the tone. It wasn't fear, it was peace. "Good," he muttered, and sat down. But deep inside, he felt uneasy. Amina had not shouted, not cried, not begged. She had become quiet, and sometimes silence is more powerful than words. The city woman had found her spirit again, and though Kwame didn't know it yet, a storm was coming. The morning after Amina found her strength, the world seemed different. The same city that once felt like a prison now looked like a challenge waiting to be conquered. The same broom she once hated became a symbol of her endurance. She had cleaned floors, cooked meals, and swallowed insults, but she was still standing. Kwame noticed something strange that week. Amina no longer cried when he yelled. She no longer begged when he mocked her. She worked quietly, humming old village songs under her breath. There was peace in her voice, and it unnerved him. One evening, as he returned from work with Nala, the young woman he flaunted like a trophy, he found the house spotless, candles lit, and a calm fragrance of shea butter in the air. Amina sat by the table, reading an old book. "Welcome home," she said politely. "You didn't prepare dinner." She looked up. "It's on the table. Eat if you wish." Something in her tone made Nala smirk. "Oh, so the housemaid has learned manners," she sneered. Amina stood slowly, her calm eyes meeting Nala's. "No, madam. I was a wife long before you arrived, and I still am, even if my husband has forgotten that." Nala scoffed, but for the first time, Kwame said nothing. There was power in Amina's words, the kind that didn't need shouting. That night, when Nala left, Kwame confronted her. "You're growing bold," he warned. Amina faced him steadily. "No, I'm simply remembering who I am." He laughed. You're nothing without me. You'd be back in that dusty village eating cassava if it weren't for me." Amina stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Then maybe that village was better than this cage." For the first time, Kwame was speechless. He stared at her. This wasn't the timid wife he had turned into a maid. This was the woman he once fell in love with, the woman who used to look at him with pure admiration. Now, her eyes held truth. In the days that followed, Amina began to rebuild her life in small ways. She started baking bread and selling it to neighbors. The aroma filled the compound each morning, drawing people in. Her hands, once used for chores, were now creating something that gave her dignity. One woman, Sister Akua, who ran a small cafe nearby, noticed her skill. "Amina, your bread could feed the whole street. Come, let's sell it together." Amina hesitated at first. Kwame would never allow it. But then she remembered her mother's words. "A wife is not a servant, but a partner." She agreed. Soon her bread was famous in the neighborhood. People came from different parts of the district just to buy it. The little she earned, she hid carefully in her wooden jewelry box, the same box her mother had given her Dot. When Kwame discovered it, he was furious. "You're working behind my back." Amina faced him without fear. "I'm working for my back so that it never bends again." He slapped the table, his anger boiling. "You will stop this foolishness." But Amina didn't stop. Every day she baked, sold, and saved. For every loaf she sold, her confidence rose like the dough she needed. She was no longer a maid in her own house. She was a woman reclaiming her life. One rainy night, when thunder rolled across the sky, Kwame came home drunk and angry. "You think you can defy me?" he shouted, throwing her bread basket across the floor. Amina stood still. "You can break my bread, Kwame, but you can't break me." He glared at her, the storm flashing outside, mirroring the fury in his eyes. But then something shifted. He saw it, not fear, not pain, but dignity, the kind that no man could crush. For the first time, Kwame felt small, and for the first time, Amina felt free. The rainy season came with thunder that seemed to shake even the proudest homes in the city. Water dripped from rooftops, and the streets flooded like rivers. But inside Kwame's mansion, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that had nothing to do with rain. Amina's small bread business had turned into something much bigger. Every morning, women lined up outside her gate, waiting for the smell of her fresh loaves. They whispered about her kindness, her quiet strength, and her resilience. Even those who once mocked her began to admire her courage. Meanwhile, Kwame's business was collapsing. The partners he trusted betrayed him, and the contracts he bragged about were canceled one after another. The money that once flowed like a river dried up overnight. He returned home one evening, drenched and defeated. His fine suit was stained with mud, and his car had been repossessed. The house that once echoed with laughter now felt empty. Nala, the woman he had chosen over his wife, was gone. She had disappeared the moment his wealth vanished. Only Amina remained. He opened the door and found her baking bread, humming an old song from their wedding day. The warmth of the oven filled the air, and for the first time in years, Kwame looked at her, really looked. She was still beautiful, her skin glowing in the firelight, her hands steady. But she didn't look up. She didn't rush to help him, didn't ask what was wrong. She simply said, "Wash the rain off before you catch cold." and continued kneading the dough. Kwame dropped his briefcase. Amina, things have gone bad. She didn't answer immediately. After a long pause, she said, I know. The streets talk. He sighed. They turned on me. Everyone I trusted. Amina looked at him quietly. You turned on me first. Her words hit harder than thunder. He opened his mouth to reply, but no sound came. He realized then that he had built his life on pride and cruelty, and now both had abandoned him. For days, he wandered around the house, lost and restless. He watched as Amina continued her routine, baking, cleaning, selling. People came to her for advice, laughter, and kindness. The same woman he had treated like a maid was now the pillar of their home. One night, unable to sleep, Kwame walked into the kitchen. Amina was there, packing bread for the morning. Amina, he began softly. I'm sorry. She didn't stop working. Sorry for what, Kwame? For turning me into a servant, or for realizing too late that I was your blessing? He bowed his head. For everything. She looked up, her eyes filled not with anger but quiet wisdom. Regret doesn't rebuild what pride destroyed. You wanted a servant. Now you've become one, to your own guilt. Kwame felt tears rise. He had been powerful once, feared by many, but now he was a man broken by his own choices. Weeks passed. The mansion began to empty, furniture sold, cars gone, savings drained. But somehow, Amina's bread business kept them fed. She never mocked him, never reminded him of his downfall. She just worked, prayed, and lived with dignity. One Sunday morning, Kwame followed her to the market. He watched as she sold bread to smiling customers who called her Mama Amina. The respect in their eyes was real, something his money had never earned. When they returned home, he sat beside her and said, You are stronger than I ever was. Amina smiled faintly. Strength is not about power, Kwame. It's about heart, something you forgot until you lost everything. He looked at her with shame and admiration. The woman he once turned into a maid had become his teacher. Outside, the rain began again, washing the dust off the red earth. Inside, Kwame sat quietly, realizing that sometimes the fall of a proud man is the beginning of his true education, and Amina, the woman who refused to break, had become his lesson. Months passed, and the world around them slowly changed. The grand mansion that once stood as a symbol of pride was now quiet but peaceful. The city noise outside still roared, but inside those walls, a new story was unfolding, one built not on money, but on humility and forgiveness. Kwame. The man who had once treated his wife like a maid had changed. Every morning he woke before dawn, helping Amina pack loaves of bread for sale. He carried baskets to the market, not caring who saw him. The same hands that once signed business contracts now lifted trays and counted coins. The neighbors whispered, Is that Kwame, the mighty trader? Yes, others replied. And the woman he turned into a servant is now the one saving him. Amina heard the whispers too, but she never gloated. She simply worked harder. She knew that revenge could never heal a broken heart, but purpose could. One afternoon, a community officer from the women's cooperative came to the market. We've heard about your bread, Mama Amina, she said warmly. We're opening a local bakery and want you to train young women in business. Amina blinked in surprise. Me? Yes, you, the officer smiled. You turned pain into power. You're exactly who we need." Tears welled in her eyes as she accepted. That evening, she returned home and told Kwame. He looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "You deserve it," he said quietly. "You've done what I could not." The next day, Amina began her new journey. Young women gathered around her, eager to learn not only how to bake, but how to believe in themselves. "Never let anyone turn you into what you're not," she told them. "Even if the world forgets your worth, remember it yourself." Her bakery grew fast. Within a year, it became the heart of the community, a place where women found strength, laughter, and unity. The aroma of her bread spread beyond the streets, and people traveled from distant towns just to taste it. Kwame worked quietly beside her. He didn't lead anymore, he served. When customers came, he carried bags, swept floors, and smiled humbly. Sometimes, people mocked him, but he no longer cared. He had learned that pride feeds no soul. One morning, as the sun rose over the red rooftops, Kwame approached Amina. "You once said a husband and wife are partners," he began softly. "I was blind to that truth. But if you allow me, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I have learned." Amina looked at him, really looked. She saw not the arrogant man she once married, but someone humbled, changed, and finally human. She smiled faintly. "The past cannot be erased, Kwame, but it can teach us. If you truly mean those words, then help me build what we both once destroyed." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I will." From that day forward, they worked as equals. Together, they expanded the bakery, opening branches across the region. People came not just for bread, but for the story of a man's fall and a woman's rise, of forgiveness stronger than pride. Years later, as the sun set behind the hills of Nkanzi village, Amina returned home. The same baobab tree still stood tall, watching over the land where she was born. Her mother's words echoed in her heart. "A wife is not a servant, but a partner," she smiled, setting down a basket of bread beside the old tree. The scent drifted through the air, sweet and warm, like the life she had rebuilt from ashes. Behind her, Kwame stood quietly, no longer the master, but the man who had finally learned love's true meaning. Amina turned to him and said softly, "You see, Kwame, even the smallest seed can grow again if it finds the right soil." And as the wind carried the smell of her bread through the evening air, the village drums began to beat, not for a wedding this time, but for a woman who found her strength, and a man who found his soul. Moral of the story: no love built on pride can last, but love rooted in respect can rise again.